In 1940, the world was already collapsing. Europe, once filled with powerful nations, had turned into a battlefield where defeat came faster than anyone imagined. Armies surrendered in days. Governments fell overnight. Entire countries vanished from the map. At the center of it all stood one man, Adolf Hitler. He wasn't just fighting a war. He was trying to reshape the world. His goal was simple total domination, and for a while, it worked. Germany's military introduced a terrifying new style of warfare, Blitzkrieg. Fast, brutal, and precise. Tanks advanced before defenses were ready. Planes destroyed communication. Soldiers moved so quickly that enemies were defeated before they could react. First, Poland fell. Then came France, one of Europe's strongest powers, defeated in just over a month. The world was shocked. Even Britain stood alone, facing a force that seemed impossible to stop. With every victory, Hitler grew more confident. Success turned into certainty. And certainty turned into something far more dangerous: belief in his own invincibility. By 1941, he controlled most of Europe. He had power. He had control. But instead of stopping, he wanted more. And that desire led to a single decision, one that would turn victory into collapse. Because the most dangerous moment for any empire is when it believes it cannot lose. In June 1941, at the peak of his power, Adolf Hitler made the most dangerous decision of his entire war. He turned east. Without warning, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in human history. Over 3 million soldiers crossed the border. Thousands of tanks rolled forward. Aircraft filled the skies. It wasn't just an attack, it was a massive, unstoppable force aimed at crushing an entire nation. The target was the Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin. Hitler believed it would be a quick victory. He thought the Soviet Union would collapse just like the others. Weeks, maybe months, that's all he expected it to take. At first, it seemed he was right. German forces advanced rapidly. Huge Soviet armies were surrounded and destroyed. Millions of prisoners were taken. City after city fell as the German war machine pushed deeper into enemy territory. It looked like another unstoppable victory. But this time, something was different. The Soviet Union didn't collapse. It kept fighting. It kept retreating. And as it did, it pulled German forces deeper and deeper into its vast land. Every mile gained made supply lines weaker. Every victory stretched the German army thinner. Hitler wasn't just fighting an enemy anymore. He was fighting distance, time, and a nation that refused to surrender. And slowly, without realizing it, he was walking straight into disaster. As German forces pushed deeper into the Soviet Union, victory still seemed within reach. Cities had fallen. Armies had been crushed. The path ahead looked open. But then, everything began to change. The advance slowed, not because of a powerful counterattack, but because of something far more brutal: winter. At first, it didn't seem like a threat. German commanders believed the war would be over before the cold truly arrived. They were wrong. Temperatures dropped rapidly. -10 degrees Celsius, -20 degrees Celsius, even lower. Weapons froze. Tanks refused to start. Supplies stopped reaching the front lines. Soldiers, unprepared for such extreme cold, began to suffer. Frostbite, starvation, exhaustion. The powerful German army built for speed and precision was now stuck, struggling just to survive. Meanwhile, the Soviet forces adapted. They were used to the cold. They had the equipment. They had the patience. Instead of collapsing, they grew stronger. Led by Joseph Stalin, the Red Army began to regroup, rebuild, and prepare for a counterattack. And when it came, it was relentless. German troops, already weakened by the freezing conditions, were pushed back for the first time. The unstoppable advance had finally been halted. What was supposed to be a quick, decisive victory had turned into a slow, grinding nightmare. Hitler had underestimated the Soviet Union. But more importantly, he had underestimated the war itself. And from this moment on, everything began to slip out of his control. By 1942, Adolf Hitler needed a decisive victory. The war in the Soviet Union had dragged on longer than expected. Resources were running thin. Momentum was slipping. So Hitler made another bold move. He focused everything on one city, Stalingrad. This wasn't just a strategic target. It was symbolic. A city carrying the name of his enemy, Joseph Stalin. Capturing it would be a powerful statement. The battle that followed was unlike anything seen before. This wasn't fast warfare. This wasn't Blitzkrieg. This was chaos, street by street, building by building, room by room. Soldiers fought at point-blank range. Every corner became a battlefield. Every step forward came with heavy losses. The city turned into ruins, but the fighting never stopped. Hitler refused to retreat, no matter the cost. But then, everything collapsed. Soviet forces launched a massive counterattack surrounding the German army inside the city, cut off from supplies, trapped with no escape. Over 300,000 German soldiers were now isolated in freezing conditions, with little food, little ammunition, and no way out. Hitler ordered them to hold their ground. But holding on meant slow destruction. What was meant to be a victory became one of the greatest disasters in military history. And from this moment, the war had truly turned against him. After the disaster at Stalingrad, everything changed. For the first time, Adolf Hitler was no longer advancing. He was losing. In the East, the Soviet Union began pushing back with growing strength. Their armies, once retreating, were now advancing slowly, reclaiming lost land and forcing German forces into a constant retreat. But the pressure didn't come from just one side. It came from everywhere. From the West, a new force had fully entered the war: United States. With massive resources, fresh troops, and industrial power, the balance of the war began to shift. Germany was no longer facing weakened opponents. It was now up against some of the strongest nations in the world. The skies became just as dangerous as the battlefield. Allied bombers targeted German cities, factories, and supply lines. Day after day, explosions tore through infrastructure. Production slowed. Resources became scarce. Germany was being weakened from within. Hitler now faced a nightmare. He had always tried to avoid a war on multiple fronts. His forces were stretched thin, supplies were limited, losses were increasing. And yet, he refused to change his strategy. He refused to accept reality. What once looked like an unstoppable empire was now surrounded, pressured, and slowly breaking apart. The war wasn't just turning anymore, it was closing in on him. By 1945, the war was no longer a question of victory. It was a countdown to defeat. From the East, the Soviet Union was advancing rapidly, crushing everything in its path. From the West, Allied forces led by United States and Britain were pushing into German territory. Germany was trapped, cities were destroyed, resources were gone, the army was exhausted. And at the center of it all, Berlin was under attack. Inside the city, chaos had taken over. Bombs fell constantly, buildings collapsed. Civilians hid underground, waiting for an end that felt inevitable. Deep beneath the ruins, in a bunker, Adolf Hitler remained. He still gave orders, still believed in resistance, still refused to surrender. But the reality outside those walls was undeniable. His empire was gone. On the 30th of April 1945, Hitler made his final decision. He took his own life. Days later, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe, World War II, was over. What began as a powerful rise ended in total collapse. Hitler didn't fall in a single moment. He fell through decisions one after another, each pushing him closer to defeat. Because in the end, it wasn't just the enemy that destroyed him, it was his own choices. Empires don't collapse overnight. They fall through arrogance, miscalculations, and ignored warnings until power fades, control breaks, and history reminds the world nothing lasts forever.